morning, welcome back. This is Daybreak and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. This morning we'll be putting into perspective the debate on pesticides, and which the debate in Parliament was so heated on the highly hazardous pesticides. Another significant step for that debate to happen at the Kenyan Parliament, and stakeholders are here with me this morning here on the broadcast to give us the account of what needs to be fixed, and of course reports that had highlighted the route to food security, and the 2023 one will be talking about how to attain that. On my far right is Dr. Paul Ngaruya. He is the Acting General Manager, Research and Strategy, Pest Control Products Board. Good morning. Lovely to have you here, Dr.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for making time for the broadcast. On my immediate right is Emmanuel Atamba, who is on my far right, who is a food systems and policy expert. Good morning, Emmanuel.
Good morning.
Lovely having you here on the broadcast. Okisegere Ojapat is the Chief Executive Officer of the Fresh Produce Consortium of Kenya. Good morning.
Morning.
Want to see you. Thank you. Lovely having you here on the broadcast. And on my immediate right is Barasa Wanyonyi, the Head of Registration Department, the Pest Control Policy, that is the organization that he represents here. Good morning.
Morning.
And thank you for finding time for the broadcast. So we had the debate in Parliament. I'm sure you all followed, given that it's of keen interest to you, gentlemen. Let's begin with this soundbite of the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Gladys Bose, who in the midst of the heated debate in Parliament had this to say, and also other members of Parliament whose soundbites will be playing here on the broadcast this morning as we set the stage for this conversation here on Daybreak.
Pesticides, or even Roundup, as he says, is a big problem in the country. It is known by all levels of government, the challenge. There has been a document called the Pesticide Atlas that was developed by 20 scientists from the University of Nairobi. It has been confirmed that 267 pesticides that are banned in Europe and America are in use in Kenya. The Pest Products Control Board is the one that is supposed to make the list of approved pesticides. Those banned pesticides are still on our list. So the offenders here now are the Pest Products Control Board members. I have written a petition requesting for their removal from office to the Agriculture Minister because they have failed and endangered Kenyans' lives.
All right, let me begin with you, Emmanuel Atamba, before I come to the representatives here of the Pest Control Policy Board members that cited by the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. But give us an account, an assessment. Are we in that danger as expressed by the lawmakers, amongst them the Deputy Speaker and the Uasin Gishu Women Rep?
Thanks, Abdi, and thanks for the invitation. There is a serious issue. I would not say it may be exactly in the words of the Deputy Speaker, and she knows where she's speaking from. But she's definitely right that there is a serious issue when it comes to the kind of products that are in our market today and how producers are interacting with those products and the kind of impacts that we are seeing on environment, on human health, and also on biodiversity. So there is a significant threat. And this discussion, I participated in this discussion in 2020 under the public petition number 70 of 2019. Sorry, that is the petition that was taken to Parliament by Honorable Shole. And I'm sure she is speaking from that perspective. Where in the organization I used to work with before, we were able to map out, to look at the database of pesticides that are registered by PCPB in Kenya and compare that with the database of pesticide registration in the EU. And we found that at least 30% of the products that are registered in our market today have already been banned or withdrawn from the market in Europe. So that was the beginning of that discussion.
About how many pesticides?
That was, at that time, that was about 230-something products in the market. Because, you know, pesticides are registered also. We are looking at the database in terms of active ingredients and not necessarily the product names. But I'm sure when we hear from PCPB, they have already withdrawn some of the products that were, in fact, part of the petition that we took to Parliament. Because there was a report from the Parliamentary Health Committee instructing PCPB to do a very speed review a speedy review of existing products in the market and look at the active ingredients that we had listed. And after a lot of discussion in Parliament, again through the petition that was taken by Honorable Sholay based on findings that were brought out by civil society, the PCPB was then instructed to review these products with urgency and remove some of the products that the PCPB will then find unsuitable to be in the market.
Okay.
So that is where the discussion was. And I think the discussion went quiet for a long time, and I think now it has started again, which is good because now it gives us a chance to ask Dr. Ngaruya and the PCPB team, how far have we come in terms of the review of the products that had been put in question. I know they have removed quite a number of active ingredients, and that is, in terms of products, that is tens of products that have already started being removed from the market.
All right. And Dr. Ngaruya, to you, of course, the debate reaffirms the need for proper comprehensive policies that need to be in place. But of the 200 pesticides cited by the lawmaker there, and we'll be having some other sound bites, which has raised concern among many Kenyans as well, what has the Pest Control Products Board done about this and the concerns that were raised by the stakeholders as well?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Since PCPB was established way back in 1985, we have always been doing risk evaluation, risk assessment of all products before they are out for use. Let me say that pesticides are a necessary evil. Why am I saying that? It's because if you look at our situation here in Kenya, we are in the tropics. In the tropics, we have very good environment both for human habitation, for crop production, and also for pest infiltration. If a pest moves from another part of the continent and comes into the tropics, it tends to increase. And as we do agricultural production, and if you are to ensure food security, then the need to control those pests is really there. So in this region, you know, in the recent past, we have had invasions of desert locust. And the only way of managing such pests is to use pesticides. We have foreign worm, which has recently been attacking maize. We have tuta absoluta. And then Kenya, being an agricultural country, we have been exporting most of our agricultural produce to various destination markets. Those markets require that we should not export harmful organisms. This includes eggs, larvae, or even adults of those harmful organisms. So we are actually caught in between a rock and a hard place. We need to export our agricultural produce, but they don't want us to export pests. Then if you have to do real commercial production, we somehow have to use pesticides. So as PCPB, what we have been advocating for is judicious use of pesticides. And once the products have been evaluated, they have gone through risk assessment, really there should be no concern. The way I look at pesticides is that they are an evil in that they are potentially hazardous. They are meant to control a pest. They are meant to control a living organism. So a pest can be a bacterium, it can be an insect pest, it can even be a weed. So they are living in nature. And because they are meant to control a living organism, they have potential to cause danger to human. So as PCPB, what we've been doing is that we do evaluation of all pesticides before they're allowed in this country. And so far, we have around 2,000 pesticides that have gone through the evaluation process. And the ones that are registered are put on our list of registered products. The ones that have been banned have gone through the various regulatory processes. Banning of a product requires that it is discussed at an international level. Kenya is a signatory to a number of multilateral environmental agreements. For instance, the Rotterdam Convention. PCPB participates in those international meetings under the Chemical Review Committee, where at that international level, we discussed various molecules that may have either human health concern or environmental concern. Then globally, it's agreed which molecules should be banned, and they are listed in the various conventions.
You cited environmental factors, and what we witnessed with regards to the locust invasion, and 2,000 pesticides, you said, which are operationalized in the food systems in our country. Of what the lawmaker had cited, of some pesticides that have been banned in the European market and apparently used here in Kenya. Have you taken an action with regards to this, which was the very specific direct question as well raised by the lawmaker, which is a concern among stakeholders in the food systems. So out of the 200, what have you established as or can cause harm, and you have subjected that to proper examination processes?
Yeah, thank you. We purposely did a review of a number of molecules that were raised, which were thought to have some concern. By evaluating, looking at both the hazard component and the exposure. Pesticides are generally hazardous.
Okay.
European Union has taken a different way of evaluating pesticides compared with other parts of the world. If you compare the EU system, you compare with the US, Canada, Australia, Japan, India, those other countries have taken what we call risk-based assessment, while the EU has taken hazard-based assessment. The difference is that hazard-based assessment looks at the inherent properties of a product. If a product, for instance, is flammable, if I may use that example, they look at it and say, oh, this is flammable, and therefore they don't go to the next step of looking at the potential of exposure to human and the environment. So that now gives a different outcome comparing the outcome of evaluation in the US, Canada, ourselves here in Kenya, and the EU system. Okay. So here in Kenya, we use the risk-based assessment, while in the European Union, they have gone for hazard-based assessment.
Okay, and is there anything banned in the European market, for instance? Of course, two different approaches, two different regions, that is the Americas and the Europe, and Europe. But is there something banned in Europe which can be of hazard, which can have hazardous effect, and still is used in the Kenyan food system, pesticides to be specific?
Let me use the word withdrawn,
okay,
rather than banned.
Yeah.
Because they have different meanings. Yes, in the European Union, when they did the hazard assessment, a number of molecules have been withdrawn, while others that were listed in that petition are still in use. A very good example is glyphosate.
Okay.
The issue of glyphosate has been there since the year 2015. This came about because of some discussions that have been going on globally. So internationally, after various regulatory agencies did risk assessment on glyphosate, most of them have concluded, including the European Union, that indeed there is no unacceptable risk after the evaluation. So if you only look at the hazard component without looking at the exposure, some conclusions may be made. But globally, after all the evaluations, including the European Union, certain molecules are still allowed. Based on the evaluations in EU, certain products are not allowed. But they are allowed here in Kenya, they are allowed in the US, they are allowed in India, they are allowed in Japan, Australia, and many other countries because of the way they do the evaluation.
All right. Ojapat, coming to you, of course, the European market is also a target for you. And we had this debate even at the height of the pandemic and the consequences caused as a result of the flights that were affected because of the pandemic. Then is this debate that we are having here in this studio and also happening in Parliament, petitioned by the likes of Emmanuel here, the positive step in the way of food safety flight?
Yeah, thank you so much, Abdulkadir. Let me come from a position of a user of the product, because our members and ourselves, farmers, use pest control products to control pests to economic level, to allow us to be able to trade both locally and in the global space. I know that I have made very hard statements contradicting the Member of Parliament. And the reason why we have done this is, one, we are causing unnecessary panic. I will want to go back to the conversation we had with you during the COVID pandemic, and I did mention that the same molecules that are used here could be used in other jurisdictions, but their weather conditions do not allow certain pests to prevail in certain jurisdictions. For example, we have mosquitoes in Kenya. There are parts of Europe that can never have mosquitoes survive. And therefore, you do not expect those pesticides that we use to control mosquitoes in Kenya to be registered in Europe, because, first of all, there is no work that we will do. So I would want us to look at objectively. One, as Dr. Ngaruya said, when we wake up in the morning and say 267 molecules be removed, what is it? We are not using EU as our measure. Our environmental and the climatic conditions, being in the tropics, attract certain pests that can never survive in Europe. And therefore, that product in Europe will be withdrawn or will not even appear in their list because they will never have a functionality on it. Number two, we comply by the rules of the importing country for us who do export. When we are talking to Australia, just to back what Dr. Ngaria said, there are molecules that Australians don't really want to imagine that we will not use them. For example, for fumigation. There is a product in Kenya that PCPB was forced to withdraw one time called methyl bromide. And people made noise. EU does not want to hear about methyl bromide. Australia and India are telling us, fumigate with methyl bromide and send the products to us. I did make a visit to Australia to really confirm and realize that they're using methyl bromide in their systems. So what are we doing? We're saying each market will have different requirements, but the bottom line here is, how are we using the pest control product? And I want to use an example I have used for long. Is if you check around, sample people in Nairobi, they will be using pharmaceuticals and a strict adherence of a prescription given by the doctor is what we follow. If you're told to take 3 Panadols, 3 Panadols 3 times a day, we stick to that prescription. We don't take 6 in the morning. We spread them according to what it is. What our concern is, we are causing unnecessary panic in the marketplace without letting people know the processes that we take as we use the plant protection products because of what we call, what I would call pre-harvest interval, for example. If we spray, for us to spray today, and we are supposed to harvest this product in 7 days, because that is what the guidance of the regulator has been given, and it's in the label, we will never have issues of this pesticide. But the noise I hear, as you say, about the petition, the question, and I like what you said earlier, we had locust. How are we going to control locust if it's not for pest control control products? We need to evaluate our situation. We need to look at product by product. We need to know how dangerous are they, and critically, are we using the products according to the instructions provided by the manufacturer and by the regulator in Kenya? And just to go back to what you say, other than condemning an institution that has been here for the last many years, supporting our agriculture system.
But you agree with me that, as Dr. pointed out, to provide emphasis here with regards to the scientific examination, which the mandated organization here represented has to undertake, including what's in use at the moment of 2,000 pesticides, 10 times what the query that was raised by the lawmaker, and environmental factors which do inform this. However, to again query you on this, with this follow-up question then, the panic not necessarily is not from the lawmaker alone. There are stakeholders like you who are supposed to be querying the organization, the agency here, as to what they are doing about this in terms of phasing out components that they deem through their scientific examination as hazardous. And are they fulfilling that mandate as required without specifically focusing on what works for Europe or Americas, but what works for Kenya and our environmental and climatic conditions?
Thank you for that. You know, the beauty is this country has systems. And I always say there's no way Kenya as a country will import products to kill her own citizens. The products that are imported are evaluated. And over time, they go through a review. What we need to look at here is, after the review, what are the results? Subject it to a discussion and have a sober conversation. Then two, as you say, rightly put it, pesticides generally are hazardous. And I like what Dr. Ngaria started by saying. They are meant to control living organisms, to allow us to be able to have a food and be able to allow us to trade, but at the same time ensure that we use them well to avoid a situation where we misuse and it becomes dangerous. And as we always say, right from school, primary school, we used to be told too much of everything is poisonous. So even when you are using your hot water in a shower, I keep telling people, let's go back to the instructions. What does the product say?
Okay.
What are we supposed to use it for? Are we using it for the same target? And most critically, are we taking care of the environment? And perhaps if you allow me at that point when you said about the environment.
Yeah, I'll just pause you because we need to go on a break, come back and then take the account of Barasa Wanyonyi here as well, because this discussion will be extensive around the areas of research as well, and knowledge information that ought to be driving the use of pesticides in Kenya, because the focus now ought to be shifting to also how the farmers are using the input at the farm level, because whatever ends up on our tables at homes is what the farmer has produced and then comes to our table, whether the right regulatory mechanisms and the framework is working for the farmers as well from awareness perspective. And we'll be citing some reports done, including the Henry Ball Foundation, and which had highlighted on why our health, environment and food security are at stake. These are concerns that the board should be responding to, that the stakeholders ought to be speaking about, and parliamentarians have a role, of course, to represent the public as regards the necessary policies that they ought to be putting in place. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We welcome your contributions and we'll sample them in the course of this broadcast. And we are back after the break here on the broadcast. Stay tuned.